tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
We also know it's more transmissible.
More Omicron cases hit BC. Who is getting sick and what's in store for the holidays? Also,
so I'm pretty confident, with this vaccine, everything will go back to normal.
1 year later. So what role have COVID vaccines played in helping the province return to normal, and what more needs to be done? And why the Fed's promise to plant billions of trees across the country is barely fulfilled.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Good evening. Some breaking news to tell you about on international travel. CBC has learned the federal government is expected to tell Canadians to avoid all non-essential travel. That advisory was lifted in October after being put in place in March of 2020, but it is set to come back. Sources say more serious restrictions have been talked about between BC's Premier and the Prime Minister, including a ban on non-citizens entering Canada, but no decision on that was reached. We are expecting more details tomorrow or in the coming days. Now, in the meantime, the push is on for greater access to COVID-19 rapid tests in BC. Some Canadian provinces are offering free antigen tests for anyone who wants them. BC, not one of those provinces. Belle Puri is following the story tonight. Belle, what's the issue with rapid tests here in this province?
Well, we have them, but just not for everyone. Right now, rapid test kits in BC are available for people in long-term care homes and assisted living facilities. As well, businesses can access them for free for their staff. In other provinces, Alberta for one, antigen tests are free for all. BC health officials say there are different kinds of rapid tests, and we don't have the take-home type. The ones here have to be administered by a healthcare worker and require a special machine to conduct the actual test. The take-home ones were supposed to be here last month, but now may not arrive until the new year.
They work best if you're doing them in serial testing, so testing every second day after an exposure, for example. So those are the types of situations we've been looking at. When we get the test kits that are put together, we will make them more available for people across the province.
Public Health Agency of Canada data suggests there are about 2 million rapid tests provided by the federal government to BC that haven't yet been distributed. Dr. Henry says those tests are being used in BC for serial detection where an outbreak may have happened, like in a remote community or a prison, or like this weekend at the University of Victoria.
Yeah, that outbreak at UVic includes cases of Omicron. So what is the situation in BC with that variant?
Well, at the University of Victoria, there are 124 cases due to off-campus house parties and the men's rugby team going to a tournament in Ontario. Now, most of the cases are the Delta variant, but there are Omicron cases too. In total, in BC today, there are 44 cases of the new variant. 37 of those cases are in people who had been fully vaccinated. 20 of the cases are related to international travel. The youngest person who has the variant is 5 years old. The oldest is 72. So far, no one has been hospitalized. Now, BC's modeling of what's to come includes several different scenarios, including a mild sickness for most people. But the worst case scenario could see cases explode to 2,000 a day by the end of the month.
Right now, we have very limited community transmission with Omicron here in BC. There's a lot more in Ontario that they're finding as they're doing that backward tracing and whole genome sequencing. But we also know it's more transmissible. So it's a bit too early for us to say a timeline of what might happen here in BC.
And don't put away your vaccine card just yet. It was supposed to be a time-limited intervention with a reassessment in the new year. Dr. Henry says that will happen, but she expects the cards to be in place longer than January.
Belle Puri live for us tonight. Thanks, Belle. Now, the province says it is investigating several cases of suspicious vaccine records.
Throughout the week of December 14th, letters will be mailed to approximately 1,715 people who have tried to submit vaccine records into the BC Provincial Immunization Registry without successful uploads. Letters will be personally addressed and will encourage them to get vaccinated at the earliest opportunity.
Dick says information entered into the Provincial Immunization Registry is strictly reviewed in order to prevent fraud, and that the province has several protocols in place to make sure that everyone entered into the system has actually been vaccinated. Records that are suspected to be fraudulent are reported to law enforcement. Dick says a small number of people are truly having a hard time entering information into the registry, and the province is helping those folks. The Vancouver Canucks game is scheduled to go ahead tonight at 7 despite 2 players testing positive for COVID-19. The team canceled this morning's skate after Luke Shen and Juho Lammikko tested positive for the virus. Test results from more players are expected later this evening.
You know, the Canucks have experienced this before last year, and it's not a fun place to be for our players. It wasn't something that was easy to go through last year, and nobody wants to get in that same situation this year.
The Canucks are not the only team in the NHL impacted by COVID. Several Calgary Flames games have been postponed as more players test positive. And in the NBA, the Chicago Bulls have postponed 2 games after 10 players tested positive for the virus. 2 British Columbians who say they nearly died from their first COVID-19 vaccine are both fighting for exemptions from the second one now. As the CBC's Zara Premji explains, they aren't anti-vax, but they claim they won't survive a second dose right now.
An otherwise healthy Langley father and husband and an athletic on-the-go Squamish mom and wife jumped at the opportunity to get the first doses of the AstraZeneca vaccine back in April.
Well, I was definitely happy to be going to get the vaccine.
I wasn't concerned about it in the least, to be honest. I didn't care which jab I got.
But just days later, both were hospitalized on and off for months on end and say they nearly died.
I didn't know if I was going to wake up in the morning.
It opened me up and it found about 2 meters of my intestines, my small intestines. They were dead. Like they couldn't save them. I had a blood clot.
And the confirmation they feared came. They became 2 of the 7 British Columbians who were otherwise healthy and developed blood clotting syndrome thrombocytopenia following the AstraZeneca vaccine. They
found clots in my lungs, my abdomen, my spleen, and my liver. It's vaccine-induced thrombosis and thrombocytopenia. And you know, it's even in the hospital, it was explained to me how rare this was.
Sean Muldoon underwent emergency surgery, lived in the ICU for weeks, and now has a colostomy bag attached to him. But the blood clotting diagnosis did not change their beliefs.
I'm absolutely 100% not an anti-vaxxer, so to speak.
And Binter says she can't wait for the time it's safe for her to get the second dose. But for now, she fears she wouldn't survive it. She says her hematologist is even advising against it for now.
There's a segment of the population who were hard hit by this vaccine that's supposed to make things better, and it did make things better for a lot of people.
Both want to be considered eligible for the vaccine passport. BC's top doctor says she's aware of cases like these.
So we have started a process to be able to get people a valid BC vaccine card for the BC vaccine program with a medical exemption, but it is a slow process.
But Binter remains eager.
I want to be able to enjoy my community so that I can heal from the trauma.
For now, the restrictions remain their reality. Zara Premji, CBC News, Vancouver.
Well, 1 year ago, the first shipment of vaccines arrived here in BC, and 1 day later, British Columbians started to get vaccinated. Joel Ballard takes a look at where we are now compared with last year.
1 year after vaccines first came to BC.
We are in a place right now where there's still a degree of uncertainty.
A far cry from the sense of hope this time last year, after the first person in BC was vaccinated.
We are starting to make a difference in turning the tide of this pandemic, and it's monumental.
The pandemic is far from over. Last year, 759 cases were announced on this day, compared to 519 today. 10,039 active cases versus 3,171. 359 people were in hospital. Today, there's 191, and a 3-day average of 16.3 deaths compared to no new deaths. 44 cases of the Omicron variant now confirmed in BC.
We're seeing signs that it's severe enough that just the sheer number of cases, even if they're milder, could put pressure on our healthcare systems.
Colleen says vaccinations are still a powerful tool at keeping those infected from developing severe symptoms. But she says last year there was hope that an 80% vaccination rate would lead to herd immunity and we'd go back to business as usual. The variants threw a wrench in that plan, and British Columbians continue to grow weary of a pandemic that refuses to go away.
But unfortunately, the virus doesn't know that we need this to end. It's just doing what viruses do, and evolution is just doing what evolution does.
On the streets, still hope that we will one day get out of pandemic mode.
It's not going to go on forever. It's hard to say how much longer it will be.
I feel good about everything. I wear my mask and I sanitize my hands and everything.
So I'm pretty confident, with this vaccine, everything will go back to normal.
So will this pandemic ever end? In the scientific sense of the word, it's likely, says Colleen. But it's unlikely COVID-19 will ever go away completely. The goal, she says, is still herd immunity, whether through vaccination, boosters, and in some cases, even infection.
Then maybe it does get so much less severe that we can just have it around and we don't need to have our healthcare systems damaged by it and have this kind of restrictions on our daily lives.
But we aren't quite there yet, she says, and we need to stay vigilant, which means continued vaccinations, boosters, and precautions. Joel Ballard, CBC News, Vancouver.
Well, it was a slippery commute this morning as snow blanketed Metro Vancouver. The snow prompted Environment Canada to issue a special weather alert for the region. Bands of precipitation moving across the Lower Mainland dumped up to 5 centimeters of snow on Burnaby, Surrey, and the Tri-Cities. The slick conditions forced Simon Fraser University to reschedule exams on its Burnaby campus and move others to virtual exams. And it's not over yet. Environment Canada is expecting more snow overnight at higher elevations. And Joe, it seems like, okay, some parts blanketed, other parts not so much. A whole lot of nothing where I was, that's for sure.
It's true. Me too on the North Shore, Anita. Yeah, some of you were saying, well, it was a big snowstorm, and others are saying, what snow? Not a single flake. Let me show you the radar. I set it back to about 2 a.m. this morning, and it runs through to 10 a.m., and you can see how narrow that precip band is. You know, expanding out for a moment to bring some drizzle to downtown Vancouver this morning. But really, for hours on end, that convective band of rain brought a blast of snow this morning. And then even as temperatures warmed up, rain was coming down so heavily that it was actually dragging down the snow level. And then to the right and to the left, blue skies for part of the day. So a tale of two mornings. We've still got that southwesterly flow moving in, bringing precip for the morning hours. So yes, watching for some high elevation snow overnight in advance of that next weather maker offshore that will bring showers over the next couple of days. But with temperatures close to the freezing mark, I think this is going to be a story sort of above 300 meters tonight. Not quite as great a chance for those convective bands that we saw last night. You can see, though, the snowfall forecast really bringing it towards the higher elevations, trace possibly for SFU and higher amounts. The snow line here in pink, dipping down for tomorrow morning and then rising right back up. And Anita, I think we'll actually see some sunshine tomorrow afternoon. Be nice to see some of that. I think I could even do 2 days. I'll lay it all out coming up.
It's good for the mood. I can do that too.
It is. I know.
Thanks, Joe.
You're welcome.
Well, the federal government is committing $5 billion to helping BC rebuild after last month's destructive floods.
There is money set aside to support BC in the aftermath of the flooding. Again, I think Canadians simply know that we need to do that, and it is prudent fiscal management to set that aside.
Freeland made the announcement as part of the federal government's fall fiscal update, but there's still a long road ahead for BC after heavy rains washed away extensive infrastructure and shut down major trade and transportation routes. The Insurance Bureau of Canada says damage from the floods is the most costly severe weather event in the province's history. Some Abbotsford residents who live near the Barrowtown pump station were able to rescue some ancient visitors last week. 11 sturgeon became trapped after making their way from a breached dike to the pump station. 10 volunteers jumped to help, moving the fish into harnesses and a tank before driving them in a pickup to the nearby Sumas River. Each of the fish, which date back to when dinosaurs roamed the earth, was up to 6 feet long.
They were tired and they would show up, and we would just take our time and get our chance to get at them, and then we would carefully move them to the other side of the pump station, and majority of them were quite happy to just swim off, and they're very hardy fish.
2 of the prehistoric fish died, and their remains have been given to the province for research. The city of Abbotsford says it's aware sturgeon are in the Sumas Canal, and it's working with the Department of Fisheries and Oceans to send them back to safer waters. More than 100 hectares of lush BC rainforests are now protected as part of the Nature Conservancy of Canada after the Newhawk Nation helped facilitate the donation of the land. The Snowshoe Creek area near Bella Coola supports grizzly bears, beavers, salmon, and trout, and at least 15 at-risk species. It's part of the Newhawk's traditional unceded territory, and the nation supported the parcel's donation from its previous owners to the Conservancy.
They've been stewarding the land there for thousands of years, since time immemorial. And, we're just this small sliver of time that we've been involved in the area. So their support for the project, or their consent for us to work in the territory, was crucial for us to take on the project.
The protected status means the land, its waterways, and its resident species will be kept safe from loggers, developers, and farming interests. An elementary school located near a planned Broadway SkyTrain station and bus loop is suing the province and the Ministry of Transportation, among others, asking for significant safety improvements at the construction site. St. Augustine School sits at the corner of West 7th and Arbutus. It's a block away from the construction site. Now, the school's principal says the increased congestion is creating hazards for students.
If you wanted an immediate resolution to this, it'd be traffic calming measures, speed bumps, traffic lights, traffic diversions, and noise and visual barriers. Those are very sensible, low-cost measures that could, in our opinion, be easily put in place.
Aside from safety concerns, the school's principal says the ongoing construction is distracting students and affecting their learning. Well, despite these concerns, the extension is going ahead. Construction of the elevated guideway connecting the VCC Clark and Great Northern Way stations is set to begin tomorrow. The work involves drilling piles, building columns to support the guideway, and installing horizontal supports. But it won't be much fun for nearby residents or students of Emily Carr University. They are expected to hear noise, vibrations, increased traffic, temporary road closures, and reduce street parking. Work on the 700-meter guideway should be completed by the end of next year. Returning to our top story now, we are fast approaching what is promising to be the busiest holiday season since the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic. But even though the vast majority of people here in BC are vaccinated, there are still concerns about staying safe. And now there's the Omicron variant to contend with. So how do we keep our risks down this Christmas? Well, Dr. Madhu Jawanda joins me now to talk about that. She's a family doctor in Surrey. Thanks for being with us.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Dr. Jawanda, what are the biggest considerations to keep in mind this holiday season, especially with get-togethers and those holiday parties?
I know it's such a time that we all look forward to, but we really do need to be mindful of how we approach the holiday season, especially with our Omicron variant amongst us. So the most important thing still is to get vaccinated, to get the doses that are due, the first dose, second dose, third dose. Wherever you are, get your doses and follow the public health measures, which we're all very well accustomed to, social distancing, masking, and all of that. Avoid sort of larger gatherings. I think we really have to rethink some of our Christmas plans. So that doesn't mean that we don't get together with family and friends, but I think it's important to know who you're getting along, who you're sort of hanging out with, what their vaccine status is, how many people are going to be there. So I think we have to reevaluate all of that. And if we do get together, then to have proper ventilation, maybe have a door open, have a window open. You know, we're blessed in BC. We have beautiful British Columbia to enjoy the outdoors. We could go snowshoeing, cross-country skiing, seeing the lights at Van Dusen, so many things to do. So I think we just have to reevaluate how we approach our holiday season.
So do you recommend if someone's having a holiday party, a gathering with their family, and they know that someone's unvaccinated, that they ask them not to come?
I think it's reasonable because we want to protect the person who's not vaccinated. As we see with this Omicron variant, is highly transmissible, about 3 to 4 times more transmissible. And when anyone who's unvaccinated is exposed to the COVID virus, they are at 50 times more likely to have critical care needs in a hospital. So I think to protect someone and to protect ourselves, I think that is a reasonable request.
Let's talk about travel a little bit, because I myself know a lot of people who are making travel plans in the new year, but also some people who are doing it during the Christmas holidays. Do you suggest that people don't go away internationally, whether it's to the US or overseas?
I mean, I do think that some people have had holiday plans booked before Omicron came on the scene, and numbers of COVID and hospitalizations and everything were trending down. And I think everyone has to look at their own risk assessment and see how comfortable they are. But I think during a time of a pandemic, non-essential travel is generally not advised.
Dr. Madhu, thanks for being with us today.
Thanks.
Surging around the world, Ontario is seeing a spike in Omicron cases. The latest on measures there to help prepare. Next. Thanks for staying with us during our commercial-free live stream. Unusual theft caught on video this summer has a happy ending. It's a well-known Toronto artist, and he says he accepted he would never see one of his prized paintings again. But as Talia Ritchie reports, he recently got a call from police that it had been found.
Toronto artist Peter Triantos has encountered many buyers in his career, and one in particular who came by in the summer seemed pretty serious.
They came in to see the painting. They wanted to purchase the painting. Came in once, came in again twice, knew quite a bit about me, the story about the painting.
But on the day of the sale in July, which was over $10,000, Triantos said something didn't seem quite right.
Kind of had a weird little feeling. I didn't really feel like everything was like normal, so I just had a weird feeling the way he was acting, very kind of nervous.
And in this video the gallery took to celebrate the sale on social media, you can see the man is turning away from the camera. His intuition was strong enough that Triantos snapped a quick photo of the man's license plate.
And then we got a call later on that the sale wasn't that good, the credit card, something was up, and so we figured we lost the money, insurance didn't cover.
He paid it back and accepted the loss. This week, he got an unexpected call.
My wife answers the phone. I was kind of listening in, and she says, well, they got the painting back. Got the guy. You believe this?
No.
I got my painting back.
Oh my God.
Toronto police say as part of an ongoing fraud investigation, officers searched a property last week where they recovered a painting. Police say that painting has now been returned to its owner.
But I never thought somebody would go as far as to steal one of my works. I am forgiving. I understand people make mistakes, and that I do feel a little bit bad. I have no resentment to this guy. Who knows how he was thinking.
And now people are making offers. But Triantos has to hold on to the piece until the investigation is complete.
Here it is back, so now it kind of has a little bit of a soft spot to me, and it made a full circle, like it says there, and run and rise, and so many things on there. To happen to this piece, maybe it is special. I don't know, maybe it is, there's something in it that remains to be seen. So.
Talia Ritchie, CBC News, Toronto.
In the year 2050, how will BC look? From agriculture to cities, how will climate change change life? Don't miss 2050 Degrees of Change, a CBC Vancouver original podcast, now available.
Hospitalizations in Ontario are already starting to trend up. The province's top doctor today clear about a coming storm, but as Ellen Morrow shows us, less clear at this point is what the province plans to do about it.
Ontario's Chief Medical Officer of Health, Dr. Kieran Moore, called Omicron a game changer.
Because it spreads so quickly, we're anticipating a potential impact on our healthcare system.
But the province's play has largely stayed the same. Besides more protections at long-term care homes, the Ontario government did not announce any new measures. So far, no accelerated third doses, no further restrictions, despite days of warnings from healthcare workers.
This freight train is barreling at us very quickly.
Our systems are already stressed during Christmas, and we do not need an additional stress like this to add on top of that.
Moore was asked why Ontario isn't acting faster.
I do believe there will be a discussion in the coming days about what additional measures we may need, if any.
So with this spreading so rapidly, a lot of people, I think, will be hoping that you come out with that soon.
Respirologist Samir Gupta is one of them.
We are very worried about this being inundated with people with COVID who are sick, who are, backfilling up our ICUs and our hospitals.
The province is asking Ontarians to reduce their contacts while allowing them to attend full-capacity stadium events. A confusing message, says Gupta.
It's like at earlier phases of this pandemic where the government is not taking the steps it needs to take.
Moore was the top doctor in the Kingston region throughout most of the pandemic when the area was a COVID success story. But he does not have the final call on Ontario's COVID policy.
At the end of the day, it's government that makes these decisions. It's not the Chief Medical Officer of Health.
Moore hinted at further announcements, and one is expected from Premier Doug Ford on Wednesday about the province's rollout of third doses. The Premier is set to meet with his cabinet in the morning. Ellen Morrow, CBC News, Toronto.
Omicron is highly transmissible, that much is clear, but more data is also coming in about how it fares against vaccines. Wikidopia has the implications for hospitals and the holidays.
The pandemic pushed Christmas dinner outside last year for Chris Chubbs' family. And Omicron will likely do that again.
The way things are going this week, every day seems to be things going exponentially to the bad.
The World Health Organization warns Omicron is spreading at a rate not seen before.
Vaccines alone will not get any country out of this crisis.
Indeed, the latest population data from South Africa suggests the Pfizer vaccine is less effective against Omicron. For double vaccinated people, protection from hospitalization for COVID-19 fell from 93% during Delta to 70% for Omicron. And protection against getting infected also dropped from 80% to just 33%.
Yet experts say in Canada, vaccine effectiveness may be different because of mixing doses, which were given farther apart, resulting in a better immune response. And now boosters are being rolled out.
All of that's going to play a role and potentially confound our ability to truly understand vaccine effectiveness within the Canadian population.
Even so, the rate at which cases of Omicron is doubling in some places is a warning.
More cases mean that vulnerable people who could get quite sick from even a less virulent virus are going to end up in hospital.
But a new potential treatment might help. Yet to be released trial data for Pfizer's antiviral Paxlovid shows it dramatically cut the risk of hospitalization or death in infected adults deemed high risk. Health Canada is already reviewing the drug for approval.
It's certainly encouraging news that it provides essentially 90% reduction in hospitalization.
Until we know more about Omicron, it seems no precaution is too much. Wikidopia, CBC News, Toronto.
It was an ambitious goal to plant 2 billion trees across the country to help combat climate change. Why we are nowhere near that goal, forest ecologist Suzanne Simmer joins us next.
National with Hannah Gartner and Peter Mansbridge.
Good evening. The deal is done. Tonight, the bloodiest European conflict since the Second World War is over, at least in theory. The leaders of Serbia, Croatia, and Bosnia have kept their word and signed their names to a U.S.-sponsored peace deal. Our coverage begins with the signing, and our Paris correspondent, Paul Workman.
Wars begin with fighting and with ceremonies. In this case, a war fought in Europe, a peace made in America, and a treaty signed in France. This rampage of horror will leave a deep wound in the heart of Europe, said French President Jacques Chirac. But hope is rising, he said. The three leaders of Serbia, Croatia, and Bosnia-Herzegovina signed the peace treaty, closing the book on their 4 years of dirty ethnic war, 200,000 dead, nearly 3 million refugees. Call it kill and make up. I feel like a man who has swallowed bitter medicine. Alija Izetbegović, the president of Bosnia. Bitter, he said, but useful. These were not emotional leaders. Their war was vicious, calculated, and aggressively fought. Now the calculations are over money to rebuild.
War has brought great human losses and enormous destruction. Much time, money, and energy will be needed for reconstruction.
Bill Clinton may be gambling his presidency on Bosnia by sending in 20,000 American soldiers to enforce an iffy peace. Seize the opportunity, he said, and make it work.
You have seen what war has wrought. You know what peace can bring. You can do nothing to erase the past, but you can do everything to build the future. Do not let your children down.
And another ceremony, just a small one, at the Canadian Embassy in Paris. Canada announced that it will establish full diplomatic relations with Bosnia. Today's signing means thousands of NATO soldiers will start heading into Bosnia early next week. There are no illusions about this peace. As French President Jacques Chirac said today, we bring you a promise of peace, but the real thing has to come from the heart. Paul Workman, CBC News.
Here are some of the stories we're following tonight on CBC Vancouver News. BC now has 44 cases of the Omicron COVID variant. 7 of those are in unvaccinated people, but none of them have resulted in hospitalizations. Dr. Bonnie Henry says that could be because of the fact that they are all in younger people. Snowfall blanketed large parts of Metro Vancouver today, making for a slippery commute for many, and sections of the North Coast for strong winds and low temperatures. 2 years later, only 8.5 million trees out of 2 billion promised by the federal government have been planted. That's roughly 0.4% of the goal achieved so far. 7.6 million out of the trees planted are here in BC, with Quebec having the second highest at a distant 350,000. Natural Resources Canada claims it will ramp up soon, saying 30 million will be planted by the end of the year, which would push its progress to 15%. They say it's been difficult to source seedlings, which typically take 2 years to grow. But the government says it will soon announce funding that will push tree planting efforts to $350 million per year. Now, it takes plenty of sourcing, planning, and maintenance to implement a large-scale tree planting project, and a lot goes into ensuring those trees are planted to have a positive environmental impact. Let's get a better understanding of all of this. Author and professor of forest ecology Suzanne Simard is here now. Thanks for being on the show tonight.
Thanks for having me.
We know it takes a lot to plant those 2 billion trees as promised by the feds, but in what ways has the government been ill-prepared to fulfill this goal?
Well, it takes quite a lot of planning, as you said, to plant trees. And I mean, the first thing is that you need to identify the areas to plant. And I think that, you know, overall, that is a big task, but this planting effort will be focused on areas that were disturbed by the mountain pine beetle in the past and fire-affected areas, which are quite easy to define, but it still takes planning. Then you need to actually put in sowing requests for planting the seedlings in nurseries. So at this point, probably what's happening is that there have been sowing requests made already, and those seedlings are actually being grown right now in nurseries around Canada. And I guess the other thing I would note is that there's a big infrastructure that's going to have to get built up, because all those nurseries are fully occupied with growing seedlings for the regular planting programs post-logging. And so this has got to be in addition to that. So yeah, it does actually make sense that it's taking a while, but still, the fact that we've known climate change is here for quite a while would suggest that we could have been a little bit better prepared for this large program.
Well, and I want to get to that in just a moment. But first, what does the government need to consider as it plants more trees to ensure that the forest is actually healthy and productive? Because we know the types of trees planted are different depending on where you are in the country.
Yes, exactly. The planting program needs to be based on ecosystem-based management, and you know, every area that's planted has got to be done based on local knowledge of the land and what trees were there before and what's recommended to be returned to that land. But that does have to be done. Otherwise, you know, you could replace seedlings that are inappropriate, maybe the wrong species or the wrong genotype, which is the actual genetic variation matched to that site. And if those mistakes are made, you can actually get a lot of mortality. And so we really do need to make sure that it's done right and use the expertise that is out there already among, you know, people that are working in the industry and in government looking after these lands.
Absolutely. And just quickly here, because we're almost out of time, you know, this is just one pledge from the government in its response to climate change. But when it comes to our forests, what else does the government need to do?
Yeah, well, I have to emphasize that, you know, tree planting is a great thing, and it is one of the natural solutions to climate change, but there's no amount of tree planting that's going to catch up with the logging of our old growth forests. So that's got to be a top priority, is basically conserving the carbon and biodiversity that we already have in our old forests first and foremost, because there are huge carbon stocks there, and it takes decades to even get back to carbon neutrality when you're planting seedlings, and then centuries more, depending on how old the forest was that you logged in the first place, to get back to what stocks are there now. And so we really do need to be careful not to ignore, while we're planting trees, the fact that we still need to save our old growth forests. That's where this focus should be. It should be not instead of conserving old growth forests, but in addition to that, you know, that primary focus that needs to be leaving those old forests behind.
Suzanne, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
Wildlife rehabilitation centers in several provinces are seeing a spike in the number of snowy owls who need help. As Bonnie Allen reports, the regal birds have been landing themselves in all kinds of trouble on their annual migration south.
A head-on collision between a snowy owl and a van last week near Regina. The majestic bird was embedded in the vehicle's grille, but shockingly, still alive. She was taken to a wildlife rehabilitation center for treatment.
She's lucky in that she doesn't have any fractures, but she does have a very serious concussion. She's very healthy otherwise, so we're hoping that she recovers quickly from the concussion and we can get her back to the wild.
Rehabilitation Director Megan Lawrence feared the worst, though.
We've had a lot of snowy owls come in already in the last couple of weeks that have been hit by vehicles. There seems to be an abundance around the city. Unfortunately, the other 6 that we've gotten have all had very catastrophic injuries and have had to be put down.
Other wildlife centers are reporting a similar spike in snowy owls. Wild North in Edmonton has received 15 injured snowy owls in just 2 weeks, a record number.
Migrating from the far north, making their way down to sort of southern Canada and the northern U.S.
The journey south from the Arctic tundra can be treacherous, but as to why there are so many injured snowy owls this year, so far no one can say for sure. One theory is a shortage of small rodents in some places has made snowy owls desperate as they hunt.
Sometimes they get so focused on their prey, they zoom right in on it. They're just soaring across the road. They won't even notice that there's a truck or a car coming towards them.
But this wildlife center northwest of Calgary is busy with all kinds of injured owls. The manager suggests more people are rescuing them.
People are at home more and finding more injured wildlife and just spending more time outside as well.
As for the owl who took this hit,
so we gave her an anti-inflammatory medication to help with any brain swelling, the concussion.
She's eating well, getting stronger, and could soon take flight. Bonnie Allen, CBC News, Meadow Lake, Saskatchewan.
A fiscal update from the feds today and some big promises to help BC rebuild. What $5 billion is earmarked for next. And at 6:41, you're looking at a live look at Whistler's Olympic Plaza, a winter wonderland up there. Plenty of snow on the ground in the village tonight. But will it stick around? Johanna breaks down the local forecast next.
When Snowbird became a hit, that was it. But I missed a lot because of that.
Are you taping this?
If you take a look at country and pop music, you'll see Anne Murray's name dominating the charts.
Yeah, since 1969, Anne has crossed many musical boundaries, from dozens of crossover hits to international superstardom.
I've been asked so many times to describe Anne's voice, and the English language fails me.
Anne Murray was a massive star in the industry.
There was no facade. She was just there singing.
I thought, can't beat that, singing for a living. Oh, what a lark.
I figured that if I got all that exposure, that it could do nothing but help me. And what it really did was tear me down. The pressure was just too much for me at that point. I had worked close to 365 days straight.
You want me to wave?
Smile.
Wave and smile.
When you are taking on a career as a female artist in what is still primarily a man's world, it takes enormous sacrifice.
My career took control of me completely. I just said, wait a minute here.
Being on the road decade after decade is not easy to do.
Anne Murray or not, strong woman or not, it's a big machine.
Here is a Christmas present for all of us. Ladies and gentlemen, the lovely voice of Anne Murray.
Ladies and gentlemen, Miss Anne Murray.
Here she is right now. Ladies and gentlemen, Miss Anne Murray.
Yeah, if I could, you know that I would fly away with you.
Thank you. Think it'll sell?
For me to be away for 50 years and be able to come home is a dream that I didn't know would ever come true. And yet, here I am.
hundreds of kayaks decked with Christmas lights and decorations lit up the winter darkness in Copenhagen last night. The illuminated kayaks floated through the canals of Copenhagen to celebrate St. Lucia's Day, with thousands watching from the streets and bridges. Paddlers with the best decorated kayaks received a bottle of champagne. The procession of light is held annually during one of the darkest times of the year in Scandinavia. And Johanna Wagstaffe is with us now. And Jo, speaking of dark times of the year, I understand something's happening with our sunsets.
Something big, Anita. Yes, I am pleased to officially announce that starting tomorrow, we get 1 minute of extra evening sun. I know 60 seconds doesn't sound like a lot, but we will take it. The sunset today at 4:13 p.m. Tomorrow, 4:14 p.m. That 1 minute is going to feel good. It's just the beginning. Now, of course, our days still get shorter until the 21st, but our evenings will seem a little brighter from here on in. I didn't even know today was day, so thanks to our producer for bringing some light to everyone. Let me take you through some light in the forecast. We've got some sunshine coming up, starting with a warming up in the temperatures. 3 right now and through YVR, 1 out towards Hope. A little bit of a southerly push tomorrow will bring our temperatures up a couple of degrees from where they were today. As I mentioned earlier, we'll have to watch for some accumulating snow at higher elevations above 300 meters tomorrow morning. You can see that purple showing up Wednesday, 6 a.m. That low off our coast is actually just going to slide down offshore through to Washington. So we're going to continue to get moisture wrapping around that low, but in the form of showers rather than steady rain over the next couple of days. And I do think we'll see some breaks between showers for some sunshine tomorrow afternoon. 6 in through Victoria, nice sunshine for you today. -8 up towards Williams Lake. Nice sunshine into Cranbrook tomorrow with a -4. And Kelowna, you should see some sun tomorrow afternoon as well. Prince George and the Peace region, your wind chills tomorrow morning will be between -30 and -36. And Prince Rupert, you're in that Arctic area as well, -9 wind chills with flurries to kick off your Wednesday. Okay, breaking down the long range forecast. I've got the wet snow risk tomorrow morning. You can see there sunshine in the afternoon. And then the same story on Thursday, some showers in the morning, but also a chance of seeing some sunshine. This is as that low continues to sit off our coast. We get another low pushing in for Friday. This one bringing steadier rain Friday through Saturday, possibly some bigger wind gusts. Notice that bump up in temperatures. I'm thinking maybe 20 to 60 millimeters for Metro Vancouver and the Fraser Valley at this point. I'll try and pinpoint that as we get closer. And then looking at the long range models, we start to see a bit of a cool down pattern beginning Sunday and in through most of next week, Anita. So I'm not saying anything yet, but I'm also not saying there's not a chance of what happening on December 25th. We'll just leave it there.
You're not saying a lot of stuff, but maybe that's a good thing. Thanks, Jo.
You're welcome.
The investigation into what happened last January when the U.S. Capitol was attacked continues. The committee's current interest is Mark Meadows. He's the former chief of staff of President Donald Trump. As Susan Ormiston reports, Meadows may be the second in Trump's inner circle to be facing charges.
In the chaos of January 6th, Donald Trump's former chief of staff was getting frantic text messages from Republican lawmakers.
It is really bad up here on the Hill. Another one, the president needs to stop this ASAP.
The January 6th House Committee is urging Mark Meadows be criminally charged for contempt of Congress. He cooperated at first, turning over 9,000 pages of documents, including over 2,000 text messages, including from those closest to Trump, begging Meadows to get the president to call off the riot.
Donald Trump Jr., we need an Oval Office address. He has to lead now. It has gone too far and gotten out of hand. Meadows responding, I'm pushing it hard, I agree.
Fox News hosts like Laura Ingraham were urgently texting Meadows about Trump.
This is hurting all of us. He is destroying his legacy.
Meadows is refusing to be questioned by the committee, risking a criminal case against him.
It's disappointing, but not surprising. And let's be clear about this, Sean. This is not about me holding me in contempt. This is about Donald Trump and about actually going after him once again.
We cannot surrender to President Trump's efforts to hide what happened.
With that the House was voting Tuesday evening whether to recommend the Department of Justice charge him. Just as it did with former senior advisor Steve Bannon, who now faces a trial in July. Outside of the political investigation, D.C.'s Attorney General today sued two right-wing groups, the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers, alleging they conspired, recruited, and plotted to terrorize the Capitol. Over 700 Americans have been arrested for their part in the violence January 6th. Susan Ormiston, CBC News, Washington.
A shadow of Omicron loomed over Ottawa today as the government announced $60 billion in new spending in its fall economic update. About half of that is to keep up the fight against COVID. There's also $5 billion to help rebuild BC and other places hit by natural disasters, and more than $24 billion to benefit First Nations children. Now here's Travis Dunraj with more on the government's priorities and the opposition response.
COVID-19 is the big unknown when it comes to Canada's economy right now.
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Also the reason Krista Freeland delivered her fiscal update virtually, isolating out of an abundance of caution after two of her staffers tested positive.
21 months ago, a global pandemic reached our shores.
Now, a wave of Omicron, the government setting money aside for potential lockdowns and border restrictions.
We are provisioning an additional $4.5 billion to pay for possible further costs of fighting Omicron and other COVID-19 surges.
That money part of $29 billion in additional pandemic supports. It includes $7 billion for vaccines and PPE, $1.7 billion for more rapid tests, $2 billion toward new treatments for COVID-19. With many return to office plans on hold, an extension of the tax deduction for home office expenses, now increased to $500. Also in the update, a one-time cash payment for seniors whose guaranteed income supplement payments were clawed back because they accepted COVID benefits.
Canada has largely recovered from the economic damage inflicted by COVID-19.
While strong job growth and revenues have helped the economy overall and the deficit is down slightly, the pain of inflation at grocery stores and gas pumps is palpable.
Canadian family budgets are strained to the max, and Mr. Trudeau is benefiting from inflation. There's no plan in this economic statement to fight inflation.
The lack of urgency and the lack of a response to deal with what people are dealing with right now, to respond to their worries, is why this fiscal update is really a failure.
This update is simply a snapshot of what the government says is needed right now. As the scale and severity of the pandemic shifts, it is unclear what further measures could be needed to weather the storm that is COVID-19. Travis Dunraj, CBC News, Ottawa.
It wasn't the very next day, but a cat caught in the Abbotsford floods did come back. Well, sort of. The return to an old home quite some distance away is next.
It's not your traditional security guard tool, but a cup of hot coffee comes in handy during Landa Rispler's shifts. She's a community safety host at the St. Boniface Library.
Well, I had one situation where I think he was just trying to charge his phone kind of in the front doorway, but he fell asleep there. So I just went there and made sure he was okay, and he seemed a little distorted. So I asked him if he wanted to drink, and I let him know that he could come in here to charge his phone, and I gave him a coffee.
She's a trained security guard and has 170 hours of training in trauma-informed crisis work and harm reduction.
If there's somebody in the library who happens to be hungry or just needs somewhere warm to go, me enforcing them to leave isn't really helping the community. So if I can support them or give them a granola bar or something to drink or give them some warmth, I think that's, a little more supportive than just telling them to leave.
She's part of a new 4-month pilot between a handful of community groups and the city of Winnipeg. 3 people will patrol this library and the St. John's Library with a human-first approach. Julian Malik knows what it's like to need the library to rest or warm up. They wish security guards would have explained why they couldn't just stay longer instead of rushing them out.
What can we do to help and have you understand all this?
because everyone is equal in this world. We just sometimes forget.
There's been violence in libraries in the past. So in 2019, the Millennium Library brought in airport-style screening. It saw immediate backlash. But community groups came to the city with this more inclusive approach.
Some of the issues that made us go the route of screening are still there. There are some safety issues still at libraries. So we need to look at alternate ways of ensuring safety, but not something as harsh as the security screening, because I think we alienated quite a few people.
The pilot ends next month, but community partners are pushing to keep it going and to expand to areas like shelters.
Landed to Den.
Rispler was working in fast food chains before this job.
It actually just kind of gives me a sense of purpose. It makes me feel very uplifted. Like I feel really good. It makes me feel kind of important.
She's always wanted to be a security guard. Now she could do it while helping her community too. Sam Sampson, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Hi, I'm Amy Bell. Here's what's in your CBC Vancouver inbox.
Stream your favorite CBC dramas or comedies 24/7 on demand on the CBC Gem app. Plus, you can live stream CBC Vancouver News. Check it out at gem.cbc.ca. And never miss a special programming series or contest. Subscribe to CBC Vancouver's e-newsletter at cbc.ca/Vancouver inbox and keep connected with us.
Now here's a perplexing story about a surviving catastrophe. An Abbotsford woman thought she lost her cat to the Sumas floods when they were evacuating, but the cat survived a journey that led him to a place all too familiar but unexpected. It's rather fitting this crafty kitty is named Ninja after he mysteriously stealthed his way across 19 kilometers of flood-ravaged land. Before his owner, Leah Bergen, first took him in as a pet, Ninja used to be a stray cat who wandered into the home of the owner's friend. And that was where Ninja was found 2 weeks after he was lost. Ninja's owner still can't figure out how he survived the worst-hit areas of the flood.
I don't understand. I know I've heard cats can swim, but I still don't understand. It's just literally mind-blowingly miraculous. So
Absolutely. Bergen has yet to be reunited with Ninja, but with all she lost during the floods, she is relieved that her cat was spared. Good news for sure. And from one amazing return to another, a dog lost 2 weeks ago in Lower Lonsdale has been found safe at the top of a mountain. That's Luna, a 3-year-old Korean Jindo. She went missing on November 29th and was rescued at the top of Grouse Mountain. That's nearly 10 kilometers away. The Grouse Mountain operations teams were able to reunite her with her owners, Bianca and Kyle, this morning. Luna was found by crews under the load platform of the Olympic Express chairlift. And here's some holiday cheer to end on. What is the jolliest street in the Lower Mainland? The brightest block around? Well, that's the question our city reporter Justin McElroy and the team at the CBC's Early Edition are trying to figure out. Here's one of the contenders, Drummond Street in Vancouver, complete with a skiing Santa. Maybe a risky choice this close to his big day. The Early Edition began profiling the entrance this morning, but don't worry, they are covering 4 more tomorrow and Thursday. Vancouver, Surrey, Ladner, and Langley are all represented, and we'll be sure to update you on the winner later this week. Still a couple of weeks to go to visit those streets as well. I know I'll be trying to hit up all the houses I can in that time. Thanks for watching us tonight on CBC Vancouver News. We'll see you back here tomorrow.